Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the BRF's 29th annual meeting. It's great to see you here. It's my pleasure to introduce the chairman of the board of the BRF, Mr. Art Thompson.
Isn't this a glorious day? It is my pleasure to welcome you here today as we celebrate and share our accomplishments and present a special guest from Barksdale Air Force Base, General Timothy Ray, who will speak in just a moment. Thank you again all for coming. Thank you for coming again today. I want to first recognize service members in attendance. If you are a service member or a veteran, please stand so that we can recognize you. We thank you for your service. Thanks again. Would all elected officials please stand? We appreciate your service also, and we know that you receive very little pay, so thank you again. Today we have with us some representatives from our universities. Would you please stand? Thank you. I would at this time like to recognize BRF's all-volunteer board. This is the hardest working board anywhere. Would board members please stand? We hope you enjoyed today's program. And now the colors will be presented by Southwood High School's Junior ROTC. Southwood is home to one of our education initiatives, the Biotechnology Magnet Academy. So Southwood, please come forward. Please remain seated. Please remain seated so that everybody can see this, and we'll have you stand in a minute. Please stand and let's recite the Pledge of Allegiance together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Southwood Junior ROTC. Help me welcome Dr. Bernard Kimball, pastor of Mount Olive Baptist Church and BRF board member, for the invocation.
Good morning. Let's pray. Eternal God, our Father, how we praise you, how we bless your name, how we thank you, God, for this day. We thank you, God, for this annual meeting of BRF. We pray, oh God, that you will continue to bless the leadership of this very, very fine institution as they continue to build this region's future. We thank you for those that have come today, Lord, to participate in this event. And we ask that you would bless the food that has been prepared for the nourishment of our bodies. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Kimball. Please be seated. We will now take a quick break for lunch. So we hope you enjoy your lunch and the people who are sitting at the table beside you. Thank you.
I'm John George, the CEO and president of the BRF, and I'm excited to see all y'all here. I was hoping that we had the valet park, and I hope no one had to walk too far, but I think we have over 400 people here, and a little bit more than we expected. So thank y'all, and I hope no one was inconvenienced. I do want to say I have a habit of going off my schedule here, and my staff has told me to stay with the script. But I do want to thank my staff for setting all this up. I don't know if y'all been everybody's been following the BRF, but we've had multiple events throughout this year, and they've done an outstanding job. So thank you, Jay and staff. All the elected officials, Art already got you. The Air Force, y'all got, Art got you also, but thank you for your service. Thank you for taking the time to come. We really do appreciate the Air Force in general and Barksdale and what it's done for our community. In saying that, at my table, I want to introduce some people, because most civilians don't have the opportunity to work closely with the military. I have been very fortunate to served as a volunteer on all these organizations, and they are alive and well, and they are our conduit to the military. And since Global Strike showed up, it's even complicated even more with more protocol, and I think they've done an outstanding job. And like Don Jones is representing Barksdale Ford. John Atkins is representing the 8th Air Force Council, and David Detloff is representing the MAC, which takes care of the Barksdale and the 307th, the 2nd Bomb Wing and the 307. So if y'all would stand up, I'd like for everybody to know who you are. It's hard to believe it's a year ago that I was standing up here and doing this last year. And it's even harder to believe that the BRF has been around for 35 years. I can remember when I was in med school and we started building they started building the Biomedical Research Institute. And that seems like yesterday to me. And today it's over 20 years ago. The BRF has always been involved in economic development. And since 2013, we've been trying to expand that role. And of course, everybody knows we took over the hospital when nobody would, to try to save those employees and move LSU down the road. We also have been doing other initiatives, and one of those is through technology and workforce development with DMI, and you're going to be seeing a little bit of that. We kind of tried to change things up for the people that are not familiar with the BRF. We've expanded and developed research initiatives, and our most exciting venture that most of y'all have been hearing about through the EAP is our entrepreneurship. It's hard to explain how you do economic development. People have their rigid 1, 2, 3, 3 steps, legs of the stool, 4 legs of the stool. Well, we've gone down the path of this innovation and entrepreneurship. It's been sort of how we stuck our foot into the arena for our community. We didn't just come by this. We researched it. We went to IC Squared at UT. We went up to Tech Columbus at the time to see how they did it. It was a well thought out plan. And I wish some of y'all could see the plan that I gave Dave Smith and how he's turned a pigsty into a mansion. Because we had the general concepts, but it takes a team to put these things in place. And it's taken us 5 years. We're fixing to show you a video about what we do in our 6 divisions that we think are important. And some of them we operate. We're hands-on. We're doing some neat things in research. Some of them are more workforce development. But they're all economic development. So when you talk about the BRF, it's about economic development, and it's about our community, and it's about doing things that bring money into our community. So sometimes they're not just here, they might be outside our community, bringing money back to our community. So we can put that back into the community. The Intertech Park is, you'll see in the video, is sort of the glitz. We have some very nice buildings. We've been trying to build out the technology and hospital corridor, for the last 20 years. Most of it has been with LSU, and they're continuing to do their part, and hopefully we'll have this corridor finished, by the time I retire. CMIT building we just announced. I told you about the EAP, DMI. You'll see about today some of the cool things that we're doing in workforce development. Envision is our clinical research division. And then we do Ed Ventures, which most people don't know about. And Ed Ventures is a direct result of seeing the Southwood Color Guard come today. We picked Southwood because of their diversity and what they did, and we've been putting dollars into that school for STEM education, and it's just tremendous. No one that has ever been involved in it didn't think it was great. But we're here today to hear about something different, and we wanted to point out our love for Barksdale and our community civilian side organizations that take care of Barksdale, because it's very important that they have clear communication channels into Barksdale, because it is a world-class facility. It is a world-class making decisions every day that don't just affect our community, but affect the world. And everybody needs to know this. They're starting General Ray and I were talking earlier about how structures come about, how institutions are formed, and that at some point in time, institutions get rigid. And how do you get around that? How do you get through the bureaucracy? We see it in the city, we see it in government, we see it in the Air Force, we see it in the Army, we see it everywhere. And we see sometimes it breaks down. Recently, General Ray and a group out of the Air Force are starting initiatives that you're going to hear about today that I think are brilliant in the fact of a way around the bureaucracy to keep the Air Force on the cutting edge. And so I'm hoping after you see this video and you hear General Ray, you'll have a greater appreciation of how our community plays a part in keeping our Air Force on the cutting edge. So let's see the video.
Innovation, collaboration, problem solving, bold action. For more than 3 decades, this has been the foundation of BRF. BRF was formed in 1986 in response to the oil bust. It was created to diversify Northwest Louisiana's economy. Today, BRF continues to identify and solve key economic development challenges, as well as foster innovation. Now in its 5th year, the Entrepreneurial Accelerator Program is a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs in North Louisiana. EAP analysts mentor and coach startups through a host of services, including business modeling and analytics, financial modeling, pitch presentation, and funding strategies. EAP was originally designed to attract innovative, high-growth startups to Caddo Parish. But a federal grant has allowed EAP to expand its reach across 21 North Louisiana parishes to help entrepreneurs like Hilton Nicholson, CEO of CyberReef Solutions.
CyberReef Solutions provide the ability to secure mobile data communications over the cellular network, as well as give employers the ability to control data use for their employees. So the EAP has been very valuable to CyberReef. One, they recruited us here to Shreveport, and we're glad to be here. The other is their analysts would do some of the work that we couldn't afford to hire someone to do.
Since its inception, EAP has vetted 859 ideas and provided services to 260 companies who have raised more than $74 million in investment from banks, grants, and local, regional, and national investors. Those companies have created 213 jobs with a payroll of $11.7 million. 44 EAP portfolio companies are highlighted on the EAP Wall of Entrepreneurial Achievement in the lobby of Intertech One. 2 of these companies, Oleolive and Paramount Innovative Solutions, receive Small Business Innovation Research grants through the Air Force's AFWorks program, whose goal is to foster a culture of innovation. Oleolive's grant is for technology that will help with the care of casualties in austere environments.
So what this technology is a blood-based product that soldiers can use on themselves or their fellow soldiers to help reduce casualties due to blood loss.
So they're really driving innovation by not just saying, hey, come to us if you have a technology that's commercially ready. They say, come to us, we'll help you find somebody in the Air Force that will help shape your technology to transition into the Air Force, which is a huge differentiator, because a company like Oleolive, we don't know what they need.
As a startup company, we really have limited resources and limited manpower, and we've really got to focus more on the commercial development of what we already have. So when we started up our companies, it just made sense to reach out to the academic institutions who are already doing the innovative research, the front end of it, and then we come in and take over and do the back end development and make it into something that is a commercial product that people can benefit from.
EAP is currently working with 7 colleges and universities across North Louisiana, fostering student entrepreneurs. Students are invited to take part in the New Louisiana Angel Fund investor meetings. The New Louisiana Angel Fund members meet monthly to invest in North Louisiana-based startups. Investments range from $25,000 up to $2 million. Students are also encouraged to take part in university pitch competitions. To date, more than 300 students have participated. One pitch competition, the 2-minute drill, was held at Bossier Parish Community College during the EAP-sponsored Air Show Innovation Showcase, leading up to the Barksdale Air Force Base Air Show. The Digital Media Institute at Intertech is nationally accredited and trains students in a new 2-year Advertising Design Associate Degree program or 1-year certificate programs in animation, visual effects, and interactive software development. Since opening 4 years ago, the Institute has doubled its enrollment while preparing students to use the latest technology to solve problems in such areas as virtual reality and augmented reality, and rapid prototyping using 3D modeling and 3D printing. DMII faculty and students are currently working with startup company Paramount Innovative Solutions to design a low-cost, rapid production virtual reality gaming desktop trainer for the 307th Bomb Wing that is headquartered at Barksdale Air Force Base.
The different resources around here have been invaluable. I've worked personally with BRF for several projects, and it's exciting to see how they're flexible and how for different projects we've been able to utilize resources that we need in a way that meets the project's needs cost effectively and timing. Without some of the initial resources and logistics from DMI, I believe that Paramount wouldn't have been able to take off in at least this phase, if at all.
BRF established the Center for Molecular Imaging and Therapy in 1995. It was the first PET imaging center in Louisiana. That meant local patients no longer had to travel out of state to access this pioneering technology. Over time, CMIT expanded its role and now produces innovative, novel radiopharmaceuticals used by other PET imaging centers in the United States and collaborates with nationally renowned companies on clinical trials. As part of a bold $14 million expansion, 5 BRF-owned properties were demolished to make way for CMIT's new facility, which will move operations under one roof and establish it among a handful of centers across the country with its unique vision and capabilities to develop and manufacture novel radiopharmaceuticals for patients, both locally and nationally.
The market for molecular imaging, sciences, and radiopharmaceuticals is expected to eclipse $7 billion by 2024. Today's announcement ensures that Shreveport is positioned to compete in that market.
The new CMIT building is the first step in revitalizing Shreveport's healthcare and technology corridor for future development. The 1-mile stretch along Kings Highway from I-20 to I-49 has an estimated annual economic impact of $5 billion. The corridor also supports more than 30,000 direct and indirect jobs. BRF currently owns and operates 9 facilities in the Science Park, totaling nearly 325,000 square feet of highly specialized office, laboratory, and manufacturing space, with 26 tenants representing several different industry sectors. Louisiana New Product Development Team is one of the tenants located inside Intertech One. Inside their office and workshop space, the team works with entrepreneurs to create prototypes of their products.
This building becomes like a hub with so many technology companies located within this building. And with the EAP constantly like interviewing other companies and like working on growing not only like the community, but actually like I would say the quality of the community in this area.
The mission of the recently established Envision Research is to initiate and support clinical and translational research initiatives in North Louisiana. Its primary focus is implementing and completing clinical trials that help patients gain access to new therapies as early as possible. Envision Research is contracted with global research organization Pharmaceutical Product Development to further develop its network of community physicians to increase clinical trial participation. It is also developing a clinical research training program for community physicians to help them become successful principal investigators. In 1994, BRF established Adventures to provide innovative and unique science and technology programs to local high school students. This year, the Science and Medicine Academic Research Training Program, better known as SMART, was named after longtime supporter Bobby Cates Hicks. The program places local high school seniors in science labs with scientists from LSU Health Sciences Center Shreveport for a full year to be part of a research team. In 2017, SMART graduate Sunjay Lechaman was the only student in Louisiana to advance to the semifinal round in the Siemens National Competition in math, science, and technology.
So currently I attend Texas A&M University, which is a Tier 1 research institution, and because of that, there are thousands of students who want to join labs. Because of the BRF SMART program that I participated in, I came to Texas A&M with a year of research experience. When I was looking for labs, my current research mentor saw me and first said, "Oh, you're just a freshman. There's so many other juniors and seniors who want to join a lab." But she saw that I had all this research experience, and that's why she took me on.
BRF also collaborates with Southwood High School in Shreveport to advance science, technology, engineering, and math initiatives. One of those initiatives, the Biotechnology Magnet Academy, has grown to over 230 students and has helped raise the school's state performance grade from a D to a B rating. Since its inception, BRF has supported over 316 companies in more than a dozen industries, creating and retaining 4,100 jobs with an average salary of $51,000.
And I think the Biomedical Research Foundation is a key part of this growing economy in Shreveport. But the thing that I like about it, it's not just biomedical research, it's not just in the medical corridor, although those are extremely important. And the diversification of our economy is critically important, because if you're diverse enough, then you can weather most storms, as you know, in economic downturns, for example. So I'm very impressed with the work that's taking place here.
And as we approach 2020, BRF will continue to serve as the region's innovation hub with initiatives in research, technology, entrepreneurship, healthcare, education, and economic development. We are BRF.
Well, hopefully that gave you a little bit of flavor. It's a lot deeper than what's on a 10-minute video, but it gives you the tenor and tone about what we've done this past year and where we're going. And, you know, if you do anything take away anything from this meeting, it's these things are important to our community. You know, we all know that we're in a critical position in our community. We need to do economic development. We need to bring more jobs in here. We need to do things that build on this community and build on the assets we have. And quite frankly, the BRF has been situated to, you know, support LSU for the last 20 years, and we're right in the uniquely positioned to help Barksdale, Global Strike, the 8th Air Force, and this initiative going forward. And so just when you go back and talk to all the entities that line up, and most of them are here today, I would encourage you to, you know, talk about collaborations to make these things work. They don't work on their own. They don't work in a silo. They work when people work together. And today, now I want to introduce Tim Ray. General Ray, I want to give you a little bit of what I think is important. Everybody has a bio, his bio and I encourage you to read it, because as the people in the know understand, Barksdale brings a lot of talent into this community. A lot of husbands and wives have been found here, a lot of teachers, a lot of businessmen. You know, don't take it for granted. Don't take it for granted. General Ray is the commander of the Air Force Global Strike Command and the commander of the U.S. Strategic Command's Air Force Strategic Air. Both commands are located at Barksdale Air Force Base. General Ray, we are honored to have you here to speak to the BRF. We look forward to hearing your insights, which we know have the benefit of all the wealth of knowledge of what your experiences you've been through. Be sure to let the community know what you want. We talked about that when we were eating lunch today. It's we need to understand so we can communicate to our legislators how they need to go about doing their jobs. General Ray's, like I said, bios in the program, please read them, because this is the biggest thing that I think is important. He's one of 10 Air Force generals, one of 10. Okay, and that means he's right in line to talk to the president on any given crisis. General Ray has commanded the squadrons, wings, numbered air forces. He's completed staff tours at U.S. Strategic Command, Air Combat Command, and the Pentagon. He served in Korea. He served in Afghanistan and Europe. And most recently, he was the deputy commander of the U.S. European Command in Stuttgart, Germany. If you don't think that's a little bit of experience, I want to know where you've been. He commands over 33,700 people. I don't know anybody that's done that. He operates two numbered air forces, 11 active duty, Air National Guard, Air Force Reserve, and Joint Global Strike Operations Center, and the Nuclear Command, Control, and Communications Center. He's responsible for all the U.S. Air Force intercontinental ballistic missiles and bombers, to include the B-52, the B-1, the B-2, and the B-21 aircraft, all nuclear and conventional cruise missiles, a fleet of helicopters, a National Airborne Operations Center aircraft, and all the U.S. Air Force nuclear command, control, and communication weapons systems. General Ray is not new to Barksdale. It's his fourth tour. His first was in 1994 as a B-52 flight training unit instructor pilot, followed by assignment in 2000 as operations officer and squadron commander. And then again in 2009, when he returned to Barksdale as the first Air Force Global Strike Command Director of Operations. He assumed that in August. He's going to be here for 2 more years. Get to know him. He's important. Help me welcome General Ray.
Wow, what a crowd. This is a great venue. Dr. George, thank you. That introduction was too kind by a mile, but it's a privilege to be here today. You know, it's really fascinating to be here. I've got folks that I've known, as Dr. George is talking about. I've known people here, good dear friends for 25 years. You know, there's a few of them here in the crowd and folks that I've gotten to know over the multiple assignments. You know, it's a little surreal to be standing up here talking as an important person. It reminds me that behind every semi-successful guy is a surprise mother-in-law. And I think I'd probably expand that list of folks. I do want to say thank you for the chance to be here. And I do want to say thanks to each and every one of you for what amazing hosts you are. To come back here was a degree of comfort for me and my family, and certainly have zero challenge integrating here. And you are so good to each and every airman that comes here, making us part of your schools, your teams, your churches, across the board. So I couldn't be more thankful for all that you do. And if you're wondering, that honor guard, if you think, you know, what were they any good, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give you, that's an 11. Those kids were legit, so. So I had a couple of canned questions that folks asked me to answer, and I'll just hit one of them, and I'll put it in perspective. The question was, what's our contribution financially here? And I'm going to tell you, it means a lot less to me than it probably does to you. The estimation right now is that about $800 million directly of dollars go into the economy here in the Shreveport-Bossier. There's about 10,000 people employed on that base, and we drive about another 14,000 directly. Across Louisiana, the military-related spending is about $7.7 billion from an economic output. And I think those are pretty incredible. I will tell you, though, it's still what have you done for me lately kind of business. And many of you are business people, and you're accountable to the boards and to your shareholders. And so it's not so much the dollars that get invested, it's the outcome and the return on investment. And that's where I kind of want to park my time and energy. We're in a very interesting period of time. You know, let me just kind of stop and ask you philosophically, what's the national consensus on Russia? Right, there's a couple of shrugs. How about the national consensus on a North Korea or an Iran or a China? And it's something to ponder because we've spent a long time in the counterterrorism dimension. And what I want to talk about are 3 key dimensions of competition. And then as I talk about those, then I'll kind of get to the end, the part I think that you all want to talk about the most, but the context of the competition is absolutely paramount. The first, of course, is the competitors that we have. And so if you go back in history, the reality of it is in Pearl Harbor, we had a devastating event, a galvanizing wake-up call that led us down a certain path. And we as the American people with our allies figured out what the score was pretty quickly, and we turned our time and energy to that task at hand. There are some of you in the room, and I'm not going to make eye contact. Here's where I look at the golf course, because I don't want to talk about people who were alive during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But there's a few of you in the room, and you remember jumping under your desks. And so when you had to go down the path of modernizing the nuclear arsenal back in the 80s in the Reagan buildup, most adults remember that experience. And so the conversation and the debate about doing that wasn't a difficult one. And absolutely, I lived out 9/11 here at this base. On 9/10, we thought one version of the world. On 9/11, we sorted out some big problems on 9/12. You couldn't buy an American flag There was no left, right. There was just America that was going to dedicate its time and energy to take on the issue at hand. And we've been doing that for 18 years. The challenge now becomes when you deal with this competitive space that we really, really are in, how do you do it without some catastrophic seminal event? Ladies and gentlemen, we can't afford to operate under that crisis to response. And that means that when we talk about the threat, we can't be shrill about it. We can't be fear mongers. We have to be pretty wide-eyed and clear-eyed about what's in front of us. I was the deputy commander of European Command, as Dr. George talked about, and I got to see very close and personal both the Chinese and the Russian competitive space. I came into Europe just less than a year after the Ukraine engagements there, where the Crimea and the two eastern provinces of Ukraine were taken over by the Little Green Men. And I watched up close and personal. If you can go from the Arctic and then work your way down into Norway, Sweden, Finland, through the Baltic, into the Baltic nations who used to be Soviet republics, into Poland, Romania, and on into the Balkans, where the Balkan conflict happened. And you can see the Russian hand in the Black Sea and the Eastern Med carrying you clearly into Syria and all that's happening there. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a full-blown competition. The good news is there's a tremendous and healthy respect for the American military after a few events over the past couple of years. And so they're pretty clear-eyed about who's the top dog, but it is a competitive space that they are going to contend for on a regular basis. I spent time in North Africa. In the one job prior to being the deputy at European Command, I was responsible for air activity both in Europe and in Africa, and spent a lot of time with the African air chiefs. You can see the Chinese projects unfolding across the continent, and those who spent time in South America will tell you the same thing. And if you've heard in the media or seen anything about it, this one belt, one road, and this may to some seem as inflammatory, but it is 21st century colonialism, period. This is about buying up influence and coercing governments to go down a path to do whatever they need to be done. And I'm not being escalatory. That's the ground truth. It's hard to see, though, when you don't travel outside of America. But ladies and gentlemen, it's a pretty serious issue. Our national defense strategy calls this out. It's unclassified. You can get an unclassified national security strategy, national defense strategy, and a national military strategy. Now, as I went through all my courses in schools over the years, you know, you did the obligatory reading of them, and I'm going to tell you right now, these products aligned really, truly paint the picture of what's going on in the world and the things that we're going to need to do to turn our hand to that. It's a fascinating dynamic. And when you think about what we do, and you heard Dr. George discuss the things that we're responsible for, what I want you to understand is that what we do, and I believe firmly in this, and many would agree, that it's the cornerstone of the security structure of the free world. Let me say that again. It's the cornerstone of the security structure of the free world. 10 years ago, there was a relevance to what we do, but every click, every tick of the clock, we become more and more relevant than we've ever been. And that's a pretty surreal dynamic. I'm not trying to be a fearmonger, so I'm sorry if I am. What we can do with conventional and nuclear bombers, I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, nobody can do what we do. We have on steady practice moving our bombers all over the globe, and then what our ICBM crews do and our maintainers do to keep those ICBMs on alert 24/7, 365 in some pretty ugly weather. Today might be a good June day, and it might last for about 2 weeks in some of the places where I'm talking about, up in North Dakota, where I'm heading tonight. I think it's going to be in the teens, so I'm going to enjoy the sunshine while I can. But at the end of the day, it's phenomenal to see what these folks do. And these things aren't getting any younger, right? Some of the stuff was built in the 70s. The B-52 is built in 1960, 61. For the record, it is older than me. I'm going to make eye contact with a couple of retired GOs, and you know who you are, right? So it's older than you. So our challenge becomes one of how do we play this hand of cards as brilliantly as we can. We can't make any mistakes. And while there's modernization that's coming our way, there's some outstanding programs just beyond the horizon. And the question becomes one of, does the plan stay intact as we move forward? And we certainly hope it does, because it's some very well much needed programs. But when I step back and I think about our reality, back in 1957, there were 68 strategic air command bases. Today, there's 8. 8. Back in 1961, there were 280,000 officers enlisted in SAC. Today, we're right at 34,000. Significant difference. And let me just be honest, right? At the end of the Cold War, we did not need all that structure. So I'm not pining for the past, and I'm not looking to get all those resources back. But I'm just giving you a sense for the challenge in front of us. 1959, we had 1,854 bombers. We have 157 today. There were 1,237 ICBMs on alert. We have 400 today. And when I look around how we operate as the United States military, we always work in an alliance. And what I was able to remind the chief and the secretary and many of my four-star brethren, there are thousands of allied fighters. There are hundreds of stealth allied fighters. There are allied refueling aircraft, reconnaissance aircraft, there's allied space, there's allied cyber. There are no allied bombers. The last allied bomber squadron closed in 1984. There's no one coming to our rescue. There are open production lines for fighter aircraft, both fourth generation, which you would classically look at the F-15 or the F-16, and there's an open production line for the stealth fighter, and some of those are international purchases. Right now we're working on the first new bomber in many years, but it hasn't even flown yet. There are no allied ICBMs to protect us. So we have to play these cards as brilliantly as we can. So when I think about the competitive space and I think about the resources and I think about the score, it means that the status quo probably isn't going to get us to where we need to be. And so when I continue to talk about the competition, I remind the team that you are also in a competition for resources. Okay, and so the good news is we've had a good budget this past year in 2018 with the good authorities, and we made some good progress. My hunch is we've seen the last good budget we're going to see in a long time. And I'm not going to sit here and bemoan my fate. I'm going to tell you we can't spend our way out of this. That's just not responsible for me to be able to say you need to increase our budgets. And I would be pretty honest to say if Congress ever asks what do you need, I always tell them good money on time with the right authorities to go do the things that I need to do. The challenge becomes one is you're a business person. If the customer is always going, I gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today, right? I'll pay you later. You're certainly not going to put your money on that long-term low-yield CD. You're going to put your money on the hot stock. And so the question now becomes, how do we drive a different industrial relationship? How do I deliver the tech programs that I need unless the money is stable on time with the right authorities? We talk about the resources, and I'm going to give you a little different twist. I've read a book recently called Why Air Forces Fail. It's not a hard read. There's about 13 vignettes in there. And when you read it, you'll go, this is about Air Forces, but really it's about any modern military. It's about a modern Navy, a modern Air Force, modern Army, whatever. And the reality is they don't fail in a single day. They fail over the course of time, not making the right decisions, or posturing themselves for the future. And now, describing the future exactly is just about impossible. You can ask anybody that's going down here to the riverfront, right? That's, the gambling that goes on. It's not easy. But what you'll find in this book is that nobody failed because of tactics for the day. What they failed for is that they didn't have the margin. They didn't have the ability to adapt to the conflict in time. They didn't have the right kinds of people and engineers. They didn't have the right technology. They didn't have the right ability to revise who they were. They didn't have a lot of those foundational things with margin. And certainly the ones that failed operated at maximum, and it wasn't good enough. So if your budget's coming down and the competition is up, you've got to find more creative ways to create margin and to be able to prepare your force for the future. So it means there's a lot of change. I'm going to borrow a quote from Mr. Lester Thoreau, who's the former dean of the MIT Management School. He says, "A competitive world has two chances for you. You can lose, or if you want to win, you can change." And so the chore in front of us is to find that right degree, that right amount of change as an organization to go get to be where we need to be in the future. It's a strategic issue. When I talk about margin, I talk about margin in the individual, their ability to cope with the stress. And certainly as we think about the suicide dimension across the nation and the challenge of mental health capacity to meet that, we're not different. But what we do is a little more dangerous and a little more challenging. How do we create more margin in the individual? How do we make them better leaders, better instructors? How do we make them more resilient? How do I make my organizations a little more capable with more margin? How can they learn to do new things? When I think about the platforms that we operate, technologically speaking, do they have more margin and capability? Engineering today is so precise, and our acquisition process is so precise. It wants to know down to the glorious detail what I want to buy, only to find that technology is fleeting, and by the time I get it, it's probably out of date. So how do I create margin and adaptability in the things that I buy and I operate? How do I create margin in my operational concepts? These are the questions in my mind, and it's going to take a little bit more work on our part. If you think through the foundation of what we're up against right now, the technology that's out there, you got to see on the video some pretty cool stuff. And to some, on a day-to-day basis, that's not real. To the kids in our formations, it's why aren't we there now, right? Because that's the world they're growing up with. But when I think about what 5G means to us for communication, when I think about application development, either on hardware or on small phones, when I think about the small drones, the unmanned aerial systems, what they can do. I was just out at the Air Force Academy last week, and Intel demonstrated this 500 drone swarm. It was both eerie and amazing at the same time. But 500 of these things elevated in the night sky with all their little lights, and it looked like a swarm of fireflies, and then it began to do things coherently. It made a three-dimensional globe that just turned. It showed pictures and things that moved. And ladies and gentlemen, there's tremendous possibilities and there's tremendous concerns there at the same time. So how do we tap into that? Additive manufacturing, virtual reality, you got to see some of the things that are out there. I believe the chapter of training in the future is not going to be in the classic fashion that some of us grew up with. It's going to have to be in a more effective and capable manner. And so while I talk about change, I want to make sure I throw out this kind of dose of reality. You have to set a pace of change that is manageable. What I am quick to say is that about 80% of everything we need comes from the classic system and the structure that we have with the budget and our other Air Force level relationships. I do believe that the next layer of relevance has to come from an innovative space that doesn't follow those same classical processes and the same contractual approaches and the same ways of doing things, because the technology is going to move so fast that the old bureaucratic system can't quite keep up. So how do you blend the best of both of those worlds? Because I'll tell you, folks, we've got some great engineers, and they built the B-52 and the B-21's amazing, but it's the things that are going to have to go around it that are going to make us relevant. Here's the good news. There are air forces around the planet today that do things only because we did it first. And when you're an airman, you know you stand on the shoulders of giants, from the Wright brothers to Ira Eaker to the Tuskegee Airmen, and the list is endless. The Jimmy Doolittles. There's a lot of pioneers, and it's our DNA, right? And so now all I'm asking for is that inside of our information, we call upon that, and we go find another way to write another chapter that's in front of us. We're in a major competition for talent, and that's no news to any of you all in this hot economy. How easy is it to keep good people, right? And the youth today aren't ones that are going to go do a 25, 30-year career in a single company. They're going to come in and they're going to go because they're incredibly bright, incredibly innovative, and to some degree quite restless, and that's a good thing. But when I think about how I bring things on, I'm always asking myself the question, does industry, that particular partner, truly have the talent to bring the thing I need to bear on time and on cost? Right? So you can innovate, and that's good, but I'm accountable to the Congress and to the American taxpayer. And so there's a pretty risk-averse dimension of that. So how do I play that a little more intelligently than I can, and how do I trust the industry partners, and how do I ask the right tough questions to make sure that I'm going to get $1's worth of work or product after every dollar that I spend? One of the things that does bother me greatly, and it's one that I do ask a lot of tough questions, and I hold myself to task. It's the competition for talent inside of our own Air Force. Okay, we are a hierarchical system. What does that mean? Is I can't just go out and do a CEO headhunter and hire a one-star general. Can't do that. It takes 25, 30 years to make that individual. And so much of it is a progressive learning. But when I look at every layer of my organization, of our organization, it has to be something that we can sustain. And so when I think about somebody who's an experienced technician out there on the flight line that took 10 years to build, maybe I can build them in 8 years, maybe 7. There's a human curve, but it's incredibly expensive to lose them and start all over again, and you know that. Here's some context to the force that we have today and what we really need to spend more time thinking about. We're going to spend a lot of time inside our own command asking us how we do much better at this. Back in 1950, barely 1% of our workforce in the United States Air Force was female. Today, it's over 21%. I would say inside of Air Force Global Strike Command, it's north of that, 25, 26%. That's a big deal. In 1975, 12.5% were African American, 1% other. Today, it's 15% African American, 15% Hispanic and Latino, and 4% Asian. And so when I look at a crowd of young airmen today, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it is a very, very diverse team. And they're all bright and they're all gifted. And what I try to remind everybody is that this idea of American air and space power, it's inherently American. And this is America. And we wrote an amazing series of chapters of air and space power. These are the people that are going to write the next one. And so they're incredibly valuable and they're incredibly talented. You go out to the Air Force Academy, that place is just electric with the innovation and the bright minds and the things that they're doing out there. The Air Force Academy is the #1 undergraduate funded research institution in the United States. Those kids are building satellites. They're doing some pretty cool stuff. For the record, I did not build a satellite when I was at the Academy, nor would they let me. So, but when you start to think about that, it's a much different force. And so how does that play in our communities? You know, and there's some of you who've known us for years, and maybe that change has been something that just kind of slips by you. But when I think about all the communities in Global Strike Command in Montana, in Wyoming, North Dakota, in Missouri, New Mexico, it's a pretty diverse crowd. It's pretty much the central part of the United States. But how do they do at accommodating a much more diverse and younger crew force and number of airmen? Today, 55% of the officers have advanced degrees beyond a bachelor's. 58% of all of our enlisted have some college. And I'm gonna tell you, I've met some young folks who wanted to be an officer. That wasn't available. They still, as a Patriot, came in. They're sitting on a PhD or a master's degree, and they're just wanting to serve. Some really, really smart people. 25% have got some associate degree, 9% bachelor, 2% a master's degree. That was not the world of the Air Force that I came into. So our kids' ability to pick up on technology and do things is much better. And so when I think about that team and how do I keep them, and I think about what we're doing, I come to this idea of Community 2.0. And what does that mean? And we've evolved as a force, and I think there has to be across our command, and one of the things I'm going to drive are more purposeful, honest, open dialogues about what does that mean. I remain concerned that some of our young airmen, that when they come to Shreveport-Bossier, if it's not hitting them right there, it might as well be on the moon. But we are used to, being out and around. I know I was asked, hey, there's nothing to do here or nothing to do that, and I just rolled off all the places. Well, the trick is I've known that over the years. It's just not showing up on the one place that the entire world is competing for their attention, is on that cell phone. We got to think about how we do that a little bit smarter, a little bit better. In the past, the dialogue kind of went from a very honest and committed community. It would go to the base leadership and go, how can we help? And having been a base commander, you kind of go, I don't know, I'll get back to you. Because you didn't think about that connective tissue. And maybe there's some things that were done, but at the end of the day, there has to be a much more purposeful conversation. Examples, of course, you can find lots of relationships. We're doing a leadership course, and we're proud to be able to bring in some of the academic institutions. LSUS has been a great player for us. When I think about the medical dimension, there's a phenomenal medical foundation here. And as we look at changes to our healthcare system inside of the military, how do we lead turn those requirements? And how can we actually benefit from across the baseline to the rest of the community to make ourselves all better, in a different way of talking about that? I've had the experience in the past where church networks were incredibly valuable to me as a wing commander, to be able to put resources in play for young airmen that were not going to be there otherwise. So there's a lot of things locally, sports teams and whatnot. And I think it's got to be something we continuously sit down and talk about. And that's something that I'm gonna go back to all the wing commanders. So that'll be Colonel Kilpatrick and then Colonel Miller, who will have to be the centerpieces of the Barksdale conversation. But I'd have this same dialogue at every single base. In fact, I'm gonna have a similar dialogue with the team at Minot. I gotta believe there's some manufacturing capabilities where we connect across the communities inside of our command to fix some problems and move on. So let me talk a little bit more about the innovation. I already said that we get about 75 to 80% of everything we need. Now we got to go find that next layer of capabilities. Some of the civic leaders are going, hey, we got a lot of great ideas. And I talk to my staff and they're blown away with all the things that are coming. We've done a few things to help with that. We're making the team think about this readiness challenge in the 21st century as more of an ecosystem. And the idea is along the lines of Moneyball. If you've not seen the movie Moneyball, right, it's a fascinating story about one of the professional baseball teams where the classic thinking was you needed 2 or 3 all-stars and enough other good players. Well, they did the math. It's so many batters a year and so many hits and so they kind of played just thinking about the numbers. And they went and found a bunch of players with good chemistry that were all comparatively could bring that data to the table, and they end up winning the World Series. I believe that was the Oakland A's that did that back about 15, 20 years ago. So I'm not going to be able to spin my way out of this. It's finding ways to get these 3 or 4 projects locally that begin to increase the capacity of the team at the base and to keep repeating that particular process over time. These aren't big contracts, they're not big programs, they're not big, long-lasting things, but it's a steady pace in a relationship, if that makes sense. So what have we done? The staff is looking at that ecosystem, and what I'm trying to arm them with is the list of things we know are gonna empirically translate to better, right? If I have to look at Congress or my boss, the Secretary of the Air Force, ma'am, I spent this much money and I got this much out of it. And so I've got to be really smart about connecting the outcome of the money that I spend. And so we're coaching and teaching that a little bit better. So this innovation engine process in our staff at Global Strike Command is intended to serve all the bases in Global Strike Command and to drive that line of thinking. You saw in there the Spark Cells and AFWorks, and so AFWorks is our Air Force level innovation capability. We're going to stand up StrikeWorks over here at the CIC, and that's going to be the storefront. We're spending a lot more time and energy making sure the culture of this is correct. So we're doing some good work about the culture campaign, multi-year effort, working all the dialogues that we need to, and we're creating the ecosystem. And it's that Rolodex of contacts and people and ways we can do things at the small scale to go bring those in. And I believe that's a two-way dialogue about what's here and what do I need versus we got these great ideas and my poor staff going, I can't keep up with it all. There's also a platform that's letting us bring in the ideas from the lower levels of the organization. It's called the Idea Scale, and certainly we have lower level ideas that are popping up at the wings out at the different bases. Fantastic stories about how just pennies have really given us a lot more capability. How do I bring those up and where possible scale them across arguably what's not a very big command? So I'm pretty pleased with that effort. There are some of you who were part of that ecosystem conversation. I think BRF was in the room. I think it starts to highlight how we're thinking about this. And in January of 2020, we're going to hang the shingle at the CIC that says, here's our AFWorks hub or our StrikeWorks. And that'll be the storefront for how our staff will be there to, instead of, as you saw the video, where industry pitches their ideas, I think what we owe the outside world are my list of prioritized problems that I need to solve. And what I need is people to work on these problems because we know those problems directly relate to our bottom line and our efficacy. That's our thinking in this. So we just released that strategic plan. Some of you may have seen it. Strat Plan 2020, it's how I think we approach things. And typically, sometimes in the military, you get a strategy that's a glossy, pretty document. And this is an action plan. So we're committed to this path, and we're going to start working our way aggressively through this. There's a chance for the things here at this command to be able to drive a lot of things happening across the command. Stuff at Rapid City could help us here. Stuff here could help us in Whiteman, Missouri. It could help us in Albuquerque, but any of a number of things inside this small command so that we can deliver the strategic capability at a time when we need it more and more every day in a more competitive space where we're never, I hope, never going to get that catastrophic event that galvanizes everybody to an urgency to go resource this. We have to do this smartly, and if we do it well, we succeed, but we do it without inciting some kind of adventurism on the part of would-be adversaries. So I just want to say thanks to you all for being patient to hear us out today. Be patient with us as we go forward. We're not a big team, so we hopefully the activity will be nice and steady. I'm naive in that, I believe, but at the end of the day, this is going to be a better relationship, I think, in its entering argument, and not just a list of things that we've accomplished. I do appreciate everything that's done for us every day in this particular region. You guys, as I've said, have been home to us over the years. I've got pushing 9+ years in the community, and it's fantastic. So I look forward to the future relationship, and thank you for your time.
he was on time. Thank you, General Ray. I hope that gives you a flavor of things to come. I know this is the annual meeting to where show you what we've been doing over the past year, but I think there's going to be a lot of stuff coming. AFWorks going over to the CIC is a whole new aspect that's going to be, I think, tremendous for our community. We're going to be right there to continue to help to support this effort. The BRF is going full ahead into economic development. We're starting other companies, and we're going to be making some new announcements this year, and I hope y'all stick with us to see it. We have one other thing to do before we adjourn this meeting, and that we have some recognitions. And would our chairman, Art Thompson, please come up to the stand, and our chairman-elect, Lennis Elston, please come up.
Thank you, John. Art. Whereas Arthur G. Thompson has served on the BRF Board of Directors since 2005 as an officer, treasurer, vice chairman, and chairman from 2018 and 2020. And whereas Mr. Thompson's leadership, judgment, and steadfast character figured prominently in the BRF Board's unanimous decision to take on the management and operation of North Louisiana's 2 safety net hospitals in Shreveport and Monroe in 2013, when no other partner was willing to do so. And whereas Mr. Thompson and the BRF Board supported and led this never-before attempted endeavor that involved splitting 2 hospitals from a medical school, creating new administrative systems and a new payroll, onboarding 3,300 employees, and establishing new employee benefits in just 135 days. And whereas this decision maintained critical health care access for the poor and over the next 5 years, significantly improved the standard of patient care. And whereas Mr. Thompson has led the growth of the BRF's 6 business units in supporting its mission to grow and diversify our region's economy. Now, therefore, be it resolved that on this 6th day of November 2019, the BRF Board of Directors extends and records our deep appreciation and sincere thanks for Mr. Thompson's 15 years of service. Thank you, Art. And I think this is Now, Art, before you leave and run off, oh, that's yours. I don't want to read what John George says. No, tell him. I had a few personal comments about, step up a little bit here.
She's still ordering me around.
Art. What can I say about you? I'm somewhat a youngster on the BRF board, having served about 5 years. For instance, I was not on the board when that very courageous decision was made to save the jobs of 3,300 employees of our 2 North Louisiana safety net hospitals and having the BRF purchase those 2 hospitals. You were there, and I, for one, early on was impressed by what was accomplished by the BRF in doing that. What it took to stand up these 2 hospitals and successfully run them for 5 years was nothing short of a miracle. I don't believe I'd ever met you before I came on the board. You were treasurer, and then in that job, you were always extremely prepared for our meetings. You then moved on to vice chairman, finally chairman. Our CEO, Dr. John George, said at the time, Art truly understands our mission in economic development and diversification, and is a champion of his community. I think our whole board would concur with that. Early on in knowing you, I began to wonder what you did in your real job. And it took me a little while to understand exactly what that was. You are the clerk of council, of the city council, that is. I believe you're perhaps the longest serving city employee, having been there since 1985. That's just almost 35 years. And so I wondered, what does the clerk do? Is he in charge of the meetings and he gives demerits to people who talk too long? And what about if members don't show up for meetings? Does he control rowdy crowds? Just what does he do? Now, almost 5 years later, I think I understand what your job is, and I'm impressed. It made you a natural fit for the BRF board. I now think that I know what it is you do, and boy, was I wrong about what a clerk did do. You do not work for the mayor, I now know that, but you work for each city council, which elects you to the position. You have the distinction, I think, of serving 10 city councils and at least 46 council members. Wow. I decided to check out last week with a couple or three of your former council members to find out what you really do. It's your job, actually, to manage the legislative process of the council as the council passes all the laws and adopts all the budgets. Big job, Art. Some of the comments I got, Art is absolutely the glue that holds the city together. He is an invaluable reference point for what historical significance an issue that's before the council might have. He can keep us from going down a wrong path. He's never political, never takes sides. He's the voice of reason. He always speaks in moderation, never in the extreme. He's the collective experience of a city, the collective wisdom, cares deeply about our city. He's a consummate professional. Remember the E.F. Hutton commercial that was in the 70s? When E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. That's Art. Okay, that's enough, Art. Now I think I understand what you do each and every day in your regular job. And I think I understand why you were so perfectly gifted to be the BRF's chairman for the past 2 years. You brought all that knowledge, wisdom, and caring to our board. Thank you, Art, for your many years of service, not only to the BRF, but also to our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Now for the most important announcement, we're adjourned.